Hello, and welcome to Crying in the Book Club, the ninth episode of the hit new podcast from the hosts that brought you another podcast about comic books and are now bringing you the internet's second podcast about comic books. I'm your host, Jean Luc, and I'm joined, as always, by my good friend, Emily.
Hey, John, are you sure it's the ninth episode?
Yep, 100%.
Okay.
And I'm also joined by our other host, Alex.
Hey, yeah, I wasn't sure. 9 episodes in, I know that there was, the comics podcast. That's the big show about comics, only one about comics. I wasn't sure if we were a comics podcast, but it's good to be the second one. It's not as good as being the first one, but you know what? They ran so we could walk.
The very first podcast about comic books on the internet ran so that we could fly, I think.
Sure.
Yeah, I think I said the opposite. I think I said a negative thing.
You did.
But we're really good. We're really good.
Yeah. I mean, we're in some ways better because we're also a manga podcast. We did our inaugural manga last week with Alita. So we're going back to American comics.
Yeah, I gotta say, Alita last week, my thoughts, so many. Oh my gosh, but you'll listen to that show to
You said
that
so many smart things last week on the Alita show, Alex.
I can't believe I can't believe we did the not the duet. Is it just a trio? Where we sang
we sang the theme song from Alita? Yeah.
It was just the two of you. I abstained out of respect.
I swear we got three voices going, which is even more impressive. Like we must have, you've heard it. I don't know why I'm retreading.
Yeah. We don't need to do a recap of the previous episode every week.
No, we don't.
We've never done it before, so it's not really our vibe.
No,
because every week's a new week, and this week,
even though we're not a weekly,
we're not a weekly podcast. What?
Happy Pride Month, everybody.
We've been recording this show over the course of we're now up to 3 months of doing recordings, and I'm still like, oh yeah, we're a weekly show.
It breaks my brain because, in our schedule,
we did a weekly show together for 5 years.
Exactly.
That's why it breaks your brain. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
so we just are like, podcasts are weekly. They don't come out every 2 weeks. What kind of fucking nonsense is that?
Yeah.
Weekly podcasts, those are for chumps.
Yeah. Sometimes people are like, oh, we're going to do a weekly podcast. And then it just means that they only do 30-minute episodes. And it's not even weekly.
Yeah.
Well, and actually, that podcast is bi-weekly now. And you will find that there will be new episodes coming out within the next every other week.
Emily, that was just a hypothetical, not connected to anyone thing.
That was not targeted.
It's not a call out. No, I mean, not every podcast can have a 4-episode Alita special, like we did last week. But that's, what? There's only 2 comics podcasts and one of them's dead now. So tough. How are you guys doing?
It is tough. I'm the host. I asked the questions here, Alex.
All right. Yeah. Sorry, I won't be cordial to my friends. I'll just sit here.
So how are you guys doing?
I'm doing great, John. Thanks for asking. You're very kind.
I don't know. I'm okay. By the time people are hearing this, I'll probably be even more miserable. But
Yikes.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell the audience why? Do you want to give a little tease, a little bit of a?
No.
Okay, that's fair. You guys figure it out. Choose your own adventure as why Jean-Luc's going to be miserable.
I'll tell you why I'm miserable. It's the coercive system of labor under capitalism, in which I exchange my labor for payment at a value lower than what it is worth.
That's messed up, man.
That's the labor theory of value.
By the time that people are listening to this episode, I might have a haircut unless I chicken out.
Let's go.
It looks really good.
Oh,
I gotta say, it was a bold take, but yeah, it's how do I describe it? Jean-Luc, how would you describe the new cut?
How would you describe the new cut?
Yeah, so I'm just so used to you having this like parted deal going on where it's like
Mhm.
half bald and so I thought the mohawk was a really weird change. I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
really expecting that. I don't know if you got
I
implants or something because I don't think you had that much hair before, but you know what? It looks
no.
good.
I like that
Thank
it's Sonic
you.
the Hedgehog blue, and it's kind of got like it kind of looks a little like Sonic, but it's just like you look fast, and that's
Yeah, it's
what more could you
the
ask
golden
for?
rings that I had put in really accentuate that nice Sonic blue. And that is
Yeah.
the color of the dye. It is Sonic blue. It's a brand deal that they actually had with the Sonic the Hedgehog 2 movie, and my hairdresser just held on to these long after that movie has been in theaters just for this occasion.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean,
And
wow.
after years and years of making green a core part of your brand, you're just like, I'm done with it.
Gotta go
Fuck,
fast.
fuck green.
I gotta go fast.
They haven't released a new issue of Snot Girl in 2 years. The green hair's out of here until they bring it back.
Yeah, I'm actually protesting.
Yeah.
Leslie hung in shambles right now.
Yeah, I mean,
exactly.
okay, like on Instagram, she's all like, "Oh, I'm doing pages. Oh, I'm doing them. What pages? Are these just like I swear that they're just doing this comic for themselves. It's her, Brian Lee O'Malley, and whoever else is on this book, and they're just like, "Oh, Snot Girl's so great. We're just gonna keep it for ourselves and be happy." And you know what? That's fair.
And you know what? I want to be happy.
Yeah,
And if they release a new issue of Snot Girl, I might be.
true.
Yeah, I might be.
Just gonna do we just have to add the segment to the beginning of every episode now. It's
If-
just like the Snot Girl status update.
If they release a new episode of Snot Girl this year, I'll dye my hair green at least a little bit. We'll get some.
Oh
green
hell
in there.
yeah!
That's
Hell yeah!
the big bet.
They're running out of time though. They've got there's like a month left in the year. So.
Yeah, I'm quite happy about that. So hopefully it'll stay. It's a win-win.
Here's my commitment. If
I
they
think there's
release,
a couple months left in the year from when this episode comes out.
yeah, you're right. I fucked that actually. Yeah, I did that.
We have a time machine. That's all I'm saying. That's why we're a little.
I will commit to this actually on the show. Is that if they release 6 issues of Snot Girl in calendar year 2023, I will dye my hair green.
Wait, why don't if they release an issue of Snot Girl this year, both of you get just like a little like a little chunk, like a little strip or something green?
Probably because I'm going to be doing interviews for new jobs within the next 2 months. So
you can put it in the under part of your hair, so you could always just hide it. Yeah.
I'll take both bets.
Alex, though, you have job security. I demand this be in the front of your hair.
I have job security. It's just that I wish I didn't.
Don't look one's job insecurity. That's the
I want to.
Please.
If I get fired tomorrow, that just increases my quality of life by just an absurd amount.
Yeah, and that means we might be a weekly podcast. So
yeah, we could go back to we could be a weekly show. Although I don't know.
I mean,
weekly
we'd still
shows
have
are so
to.
Stressful.
They are, and well, a little behind the curtains because we've gone, a few minutes and we're not talking about what we're talking about yet. So may as well keep that going. It's nice to be able to record weekly or not, and when you do, and when you're releasing bi-weekly, it's just we don't have to record this week, or it's let's record 6 weeks in a row.
Yeah. What you said at the beginning reminded me. Do you remember that bit we used to do sometimes on the comics podcast, where we would just talk about zero comics for we would just do an hour long podcast and talk about zero comics?
Yeah, that was in the era that I was a listener of the comics podcast, and I used to listen to those at my old job delivering pizzas. So I have very distinct memories of being in certain parts of town listening to the comics podcast.
That's too bad.
Those-
I just think it would be really funny if we did that on this show, because this show ostensibly has every week it's a very specific theme that we're digging into,
and it's supposed to be tight, and it's supposed to be you're going, you're talking, you're doing that.
Yeah. Right, it's supposed to be we do the banter at the beginning. We have the beginning of the script is 15 minutes of banter. We're running out of time pretty quickly on that, by the way.
So if you want us to waste your time at the beginning of every episode, write in, let us know, tweet at us.
Yeah, at Crying Book Club.
Crying Book Club.
The intern will respond to your tweets.
Yeah.
Or Emily will do it when we give the intern a day off.
That was really nice of, you know what? We're too good to the intern. a day off. Whew.
They were threatening to unionize.
Yeah,
I don't really know how one intern would bargain collectively, but they were.
Apparently, they all
They're
talk.
pretty
They all
persuasive.
talk.
Yeah. All of the multiple personalities of the one person who does our tweets.
Whoa,
Yeah.
that's crazy.
But if they ever ask for another day off, we're firing them. So if you're interested in getting your application in,
Yeah, we have competitive intern rates.
yeah,
I'll
forward you the Dropbox link to the Image Comics release for next week.
A thing we still get.
Still shows up in my email every week.
Yeah. Is the person who sends it named or am I off the goop?
No, you're right. That's who
You
it
should
is.
bleep that out, probably.
I'll edit that out.
Well, yeah. So much for the.
So, what are we talking about this week?
Quinlan Voss.
Yes, Quinlan Voss,
Again?
Dark Times, the new TV series just announced by Disney. Are they doing Star Wars still?
Manifesting this.
Alex, please don't tell me that's true.
It's unfortunately it's not true.
Okay, look, I can't tell anymore.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they keep doing announcements. Marvel's talking about like their stage 6, and they haven't started stage 5, and it's just like
They made a movie called Endgame, and now they're making like so many more movies.
Also, like when I think of stages, I don't think of positive things. I think of like, you have cancer, right? And like the more it goes on, it doesn't get better. Like you want to do stage 1 and not get out. Like, what are we talking about, Jean-Luc?
We are talking about the 2004 comic book series written by Kurt Busiek and drawn by Stuart Immonen, Superman's Secret Identity, which is pretty. I don't know that it's necessarily important, but it's a pretty well-renowned and beloved Superman story from the early 2000s. That what is it? 18 years later, now that it's an adult, we decided that we're going to read it and talk about it on a podcast. In large part because I think Kurt Busiek is a great writer, and I wanted to read this, so I'm subjecting everybody to it.
Hey, that's what the show's about.
That's true.
Yeah, although I wouldn't say I would hope it doesn't feel like I'm subjecting you to anything. I'd hope you are like excited about the things that we're talking about. But yeah, I guess we can get into Superman's Secret Identity. This is going to be your spoiler warning. We are going to spend the next 45 minutes or more talking about Superman's Secret Identity, and we will tell you the events of Superman's Secret Identity. His secret identity is Clark Kent, so sorry for that one.
Jesus.
Spoiler alert.
Or is it Superman that's the secret identity? Actually, this book is not hackish like that.
No. It's no. It's not a Batman comic, sorry. Like
yeah. So just I guess, to give a little background before I dive into the plot summary. Superman's Secret Identity, like I said, originally published in 2004, and it publishes 4 oversized issues. And something that I think is actually super interesting about this is that it's what we would refer to as an Elseworlds story, but it does not have the Elseworlds branding, and it did not have the Elseworlds branding at the time that it was released.
Does it now?
No.
Okay, I was just making sure.
Yeah. Yeah, no, the Elseworlds imprint existed, and this just Kurt Busiek pulled the strings. He was coming hot off of Justice League versus JLA versus Avengers. So although this is quite a few years after that.
Bit of Astro City too.
Yeah, I mean his stock is pretty high up. He's pretty well renowned writer even at this time. The conceit of the book, I guess, is that there's a kid named Clark Kent who was named this by his parents. He was named Clark by his parents because they were like, lol, wouldn't it be funny if our kid had the same name as
Psycho shit, honestly. Like
yeah, it's definitely like naming your kid Daenerys in 2013 style parenting.
Can I tell you guys, there is a girl that I was in like high school with for like a year or two, and then who I am currently Facebook friends with. And she has a child named Khaleesi, not
It's
Daenerys.
even worse. I hate
Khaleesi,
that. Yeah.
and it is not even spelled the way that it's spelled in the show. It's like
Oh no.
Caleesi
No.
or
I guess
something like that. It might be slightly different, but I know it is not the KH because my sister was very into Game of Thrones, so I do know some of these terms. It's
so.
not spelled like that, but it is Khaleesi.
On one hand, that's worse. On one hand, that's like it's like there's gonna be so many kids called Khaleesi, but at least this one's different. So you can, like that kid can pretend that they're not named for the Game of Thrones character, you know. Although they
You can
definitely are.
pretend.
I wonder if it's I wonder if they just like didn't double check the spelling and they were like Khaleesi. It's easy.
I think maybe they just wanted to name the kid Khaleesi, but didn't want it to be the exact same as the show.
And I guess if you start it with a C rather than a KH, you could like credibly call your kid Callie, for example, as a nickname, which is a real name.
True.
Yeah.
So I just hope we pass Medicare for all by the time that kid is like 13 so they can pay for the therapy that will come with being named Khaleesi.
Yeah.
But anyway, this book is about a psychotic brand of parents tormenting their child.
Oh yeah.
But the idea is that it's basically our world, right? There's no superheroes. The DC continuity doesn't exist until this kid named Clark Kent starts manifesting a power set that matches Superman's. Although they never really show him using the cold breath thing, so I don't know if he has that.
I don't. He's a pretender. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a fake. And so he, puts on the costume, the Superman costume, one of many Superman costumes that he's been gifted as gag gifts over the years, and he is very much like represents the Clark Kent Superman that we know in the traditional DC universe. So the story just sort of follows him over the course of his life. Each of the 4 issues takes place in a different time period, starting off when he's like a teenager in high school, then through his college years, through early adulthood, and then ending when he's well into his 60s. So we sort of get to see him at these 4 different stages of his life. Over the course of that time, he becomes a writer, not a reporter, as he explicitly says, I don't want to be a journalist. Which, what? Props to him. We need fewer of those fuckers. And then he meets a woman named Lois, also not a journalist, but an interior designer. But her name is Lois, not Lois Lane, but Lois. They have kids. Clark has to like evade the CIA for his entire life, which
normal stuff.
Sounds about right. Yeah. So that's sort of like the basic plot stuff. We'll get into some of the more specifics as we go on. The one other thing that I wanted to mention before, I dive into some of the talking points that Kurt sent over to me before the show. Is so the inspiration for this is something that Busiek talks about in the foreword for the graphic novel release. Is that this character is sort of a mirror version of Superboy Prime. So if you guys aren't familiar, Emily, I'm fairly certain you haven't read Crisis on Infinite Earths, and Alex may be familiar with the events, but I don't know if you've read it either.
I've read it.
Okay. Okay, yeah. So Superboy Prime is a villain in Crisis on Infinite Earths. He's an alternate version of Clark Kent from Earth Prime, who it grows up in a very similar circumstances where he is the only superpowered person on his Earth, in his reality, and that sort of drives him insane and drives him to be one of the big villains of Crisis on Infinite Earths, which is like the first superhero comic event, right? So
yeah,
pretty important character to the history of DC, and something that Busiek looked at. Busiek being like a very much, in my mind, like, yes, he's a modern writer, but very much like a classic comic style kind of guy. Sort of part of that wave of American comic book writers from the 90s and early 2000s, like the late 80s, 90s, early 2000s, along with people like Mark Waid, who were sort of responding to the work of like Alan Moore and Frank Miller in the early 80s, very much taking superheroes back to their, more golly gosh, gee whiz roots, but still with a more, still with the edge of like, these aren't for kids anymore. And so he's written about how he took that he just didn't like that Superboy Prime concept, that like that character would necessarily become evil, and would necessarily become a villain. And so wanted to sort of flip that on his head, and that's sort of how he came to the concept of Superman's secret identity, which will maybe inform some discussion that we'll get into. But I'm curious. I know neither of you had read this before the show. So what were some of your, general impressions of Secret Identity? Like, I guess this part is mostly for Alex. Were you familiar with like what the concept of it was before? Did you just like, in broad terms, did you enjoy it? Did you like the narrative device that Busiek uses? I'll hand the floor to one of you. One of you has
Alex?
to talk.
Hello, I'm Alex. So I don't think I've read this before, but I read it all digitally, and then I looked at my bookshelf and I had the book. So I got too many comics, obviously, but I think I had read I think they did a Batman Secret Identity a few years ago. This is when we were still doing the comics podcast.
With Jean-Paul Leon,
too. Yeah, and that one was hard to get through. The first issue, I think that's the only one I read. Didn't go past it. Reading this one, I enjoyed it way more than that book. I mean, I finished it for thing. I thought it was good. I think Busiek really nails the like core of Superman as like a person, and makes him believable in like a real world setting, and it never feels like he is solving these big things as much as he's doing good in the world. He seems like a regular guy, even with these crazy powers. He's like not, I don't know, he's not like eradicating world hunger. He's not like fighting against supervillains because there aren't any. He's just like a guy who's just trying to do his best and help people and sort of be a positive force. But at the end of the day, he's just a guy, which I think works really well in this. So it was a cool version of Superman. And we have a lot of those, and I'm sure we'll get to this later. A lot of popular things now where it's like, what if Superman was a murderer? And it's like, what if he was a nice guy who was like, named Clark Kent, and then he got powers, and have him experience that, and he got a family, and I quite enjoyed it.
But what if he had a family and was also a murderer? No, just kidding. He's not a murderer.
Oh, okay, good.
Secret Identity.
I only read the first issue, so.
Yeah, so I did not know literally anything about this book. I knew that it was on our list and that we were going to read it, and I knew what it was called, and like I went in 110% blind, so like I didn't know what I was in for at all, and I really enjoyed this book. Actually, it took me like a little bit to kind of like get a handle on the premise itself, like the weirdness of like him being a super boy in a world where Clark Kent was a fictional character was like kind of weird for me at first, especially like not knowing that was the idea going in. But yeah, like I thought this was a good book. I enjoyed my 4 issues with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely like well, I'm glad both of you enjoyed it. But I mean, it is an interesting conceit that like,
yeah,
there is Superman is Clark Kent, and there's a fictional Superman who is Clark Kent, and a real Superman who is Clark Kent. I mean, it's literally something that Morrison would later do for multiversity of like, here's this dimension where all the superheroes exist and all these other superheroes are inspired by them, right? Like it's it's very high concept. And Busiek, what I honestly love so much about Busiek as a superhero writer, and I think this manifests itself really well here, is that high concept stuff is just like not a concern to him most of the time at all. which, you know, obviously I love it when it goes the other direction too. I mean, I've said before, eventually we'll do a Morrison book and I can actually talk about, you know, what I love about Morrison, but this is sort of like the opposite direction of that. Right. And it's incredibly grounded in like the first issue being, you know, him coming to terms. Like it's a very, in some ways it's a very standard Superman origin story of like, oh, Clark is coming to terms with his powers and limit testing and figuring out what he can do and what he can't do. And like, what he wants his role in the world to be. Except this is a less idealized version of the world, because in Superman, like in Superman origin stories and Superman comics, we tend to see like, and I mean, not that the DC universe is like an ideal world or whatever, but when we see it through the lens of Superman, it does tend to be. I mean,
yeah, no, I know what you...
Yeah, like...
And you generally have a villain you're fighting up against, and not just a villain. Like, you know, superhero right. comics is like, oh my gosh, there's a bad guy. You need a Superman here figure. In this world, in this book, they don't really need him, which is interesting. He's, you know, like the world goes on, people live, people die.
Like the world benefits from him, but would probably keep on trucking without him.
Yeah, there's no, you know, Brainiac doesn't show up in this book to put Metropolis in a fucking bottle.
Yeah,
and
I was waiting for a Lex Luthor connection of something. Like, I was wondering how far they were going to go with like.
Yeah, me too.
It's close, but yeah, like you were saying, Jean-Luc, like Busiek has this like high concept idea where like all kind of fits. Like, what if Superman was reading about Superman and became Superman, like kind of thing, where it's like, what, kind of crazy. But then it's just in the background. It's the device to tell this story about like, you know, growing up and becoming a parent and living and just like all that cool stuff, which is interesting. And Busiek is like, he does what we criticize a lot of writers for, which is like vomits words, but the difference is he does it well. And like, it works for me. Like most of it worked in this book. There were times where like, I did end up reading this probably in 4 chunks because, you know, reading it all in a row, I think would have diluted it a bit. But for the most part, Busiek writes a lot, and what he does is quite compelling.
It's, yeah, to your first point, I think it does behoove the book to like read an issue and then put it down for a little bit and then come back to it, because
that's what I did.
Yeah,
like
and it
over
really
the course of a day, basically.
Yeah. Like you don't have to put a lot of time in between it, but breaking it up like that, like I think structurally helps, because, you know, putting time between, there's a lot of time that passes between issues. So from a structural perspective, I think that's, you know, a smart way to read it. But also to your second point, like, yeah, I actually wanted to ask about this because we've been, I would say not so much on this show because we've only talked about comics we like on this show, but in, you know, in the past, we've all been like really critical of, you know, overwriting in superhero comics. But I totally agree with you. There's a rhythm to Busiek's writing that makes all of Clark's monologuing feel like a natural extension of the story. And Busiek's also a guy like you can sort of see the partnership with Stuart Immonen, right? Where there's never, the panels where you really want to see what's happening are never the ones where there's, you know, a bunch of text on the page. Like just from a basic craft perspective, it's not, you know, it's not like you're right. Alex is holding up a phenomenal double page spread. And on that, there's one small word bubble in the top, right? And that's it. It's not obscuring anything. It's not getting in the way. When, you know, sort of the master of like the page turn, right? Like when you page turn to double page spread, there's maybe a couple text boxes. I think it's handled, you know, quite well in that respect. But yeah, I mean, I think that grounded nature is like such an important part of it, especially, you know, seeing Superman like seeing Clark, I guess, through so much of his life. That this book is like more interested in his interpersonal relationships than it is with his superheroics. Like you see the superheroics, you know that he's doing them, but it's never like, you know, there's never like a big, you know, there's like 1 or 2 big like action scenes where you're seeing him, you know, actually handle like a natural disaster, or, you know, when he goes to the Hoover Dam, that when the CIA blows up the Hoover Dam to try and capture him, which, you know, Not so far from some things that have happened in reality.
I would absolutely believe that.
Right, yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, it's incredibly believable. But so much of the focus is on those relationships with Lois and other people around him, and how, you know, and that's, you know, one of the things that I think makes it so compelling.
And I mean, you touched on Stuart Immonen, but his use of shadows throughout is very strong in grounding it. Where, like, whether it's the faces or whether it's just like, you know, this stuff going on around, it feels like a dark lived in world, and not dark as in, like, you know, not hopeless or anything like that. Because Superman, I'd still say he's very, like, he hits the core of Superman as this figure of hope, this figure of positivity and everything. But it feels like, yeah, this could be our world at some time, and it's like Eminem really does a great job of bringing that to life.
There's a level of grit to it, to Eminem's art, I think, that, yeah, like, makes it feel more real and less, I don't want to say less comic booky, but, you know, less sort of fictionalized.
Yeah,
absolutely. I would agree with that. But yeah, I mean, it is still a vision of Clark that is not, at the end of the day, not so dissimilar from the ones that we see in, you know, traditional portrayals of Superman. It's actually one of the things that I think is so interesting about this is that usually when you have these alternate universes, it's an excuse to, like we talked about Superboy. I talked about Superboy Prime at the beginning. It's like an excuse to, you know, make Superman a villain, right? DC does this themselves with, like, I mean, that's the whole conceit of Injustice, which is incredibly popular and incredibly successful. I mean, there's characters in, like, everything from, like, Invincible to The Boys has, like, some Superman analog that is like, what if there was an evil Superman? And like, some of them are, you know, obviously the perspectives on it are different. Like, there are different things that, like, drive, like, you know, Omni-Man.
Well, and also, like, Watchmen, which we've already
100%.
we talked about on the show.
Yeah, I mean, 100% Watchmen falls into that. It's
sort of like
well.
almost an example of, like, evil Superman.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like, absolutely. Dr. Manhattan is, like, the, like, you know, what if Superman didn't give a shit?
Like, and a lot of writers, like, you know, took what I believe, and I think, you know, we talked about that we believe is the wrong message from Watchmen, and it's like, and you know, like those gritty Frank Miller books too, where it's like, well, what if superheroes were, like, not good people? Like, whoa.
I get the impulse behind that. Like, I really do, because, like, I was like, as a teenager, I was absolutely, like, fiending for those, like, what if superheroes were kind of shitty stories, because, like, that was just, like, I had grown up with the idealization of superheroes, so I wanted something that rebelled against that. But I feel like we have rebelled against the idea of, like, good superheroes for so long that it is almost more interesting and revolutionary to make them kind.
Yeah. I mean, like, DC Comics is current, or whatever, Warner Brothers, they're like, I think it was 2 years ago, the article, but they're like, they don't know what to do with Superman. And it's like, I don't know, it's like, it's kind of simple. Like, you know,
just,
you
like,
make him
genuine, maybe.
Make him, yeah, I think some comic writer who name I forget, so sorry, comic writer, but, like, just, they said, like, okay, make him inspirational. Like, make him make him like a force for good, and then, like, build the movie around that. And it's like, yeah, it doesn't have to be a Zack Snyder-esque, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, there is an interesting. I sort of go back and forth on this as sort of a push and pull, because there is to me a compelling idea that is, if you had a character like Superman who existed in an ostensibly real world, there are, like, real factors that might push somebody like that to be a different character than the one we're used to seeing.
Yeah. I think The Boys that you mentioned, it does a very entertaining, you know, version of that for sure in Homelander.
Well, like, yeah. I mean, even both in the comic and, I mean, even in the Amazon Prime show, like, Homelander is a character that is literally created by a marketing firm. You know, like, it's it is obviously, like, that is an instance where I think, like, they actually change the circumstances of Superman in such a way that would make sense that he would be, you know, the sort of like petty evil person that Homelander is. What I think what I'm curious about in like Secret Identity is if you guys came away thinking that there was like, if this is like a meaningfully different take on Clark, or if there are things about Clark in this that are like meaningfully different from, you know, traditional portrayals of Superman, right? Because there's some things that come to mind. I mean, there's things about his backstory that are definitely different. um but I'm curious where you guys come down on that. Like, do you think that this is just like, do you guys think, like, I guess the simplest way to phrase this is like, do you guys think that you could swap this for any other Superman origin story or any other like sort of Superman through the ages story, or is there something about this that like, do you think there's a different take on the character in here at the end of the day?
I think what it does well is that it sort of reinforces the whole Superman mythos, and it does it by like, you make it so Clark knows Superman, he's read about Superman, he knows who he is as a character, and his thing is that he sort of becomes the ideal and he sort of strives towards it, which is also like for many people what the thesis of Superman is. He's not just a being of like he does good, he's a being who inspires other people to do good, in everyday life. So I think by being a bit on the nose there, where it's like, your name's Clark Kent and now you have Superman powers, and he's like reading the comics. I think it's very familiar, but it does it in a way that sort of elevates the whole thing and just hits it right at the core.
Yeah, I mean, I like this story. I don't know that I think it. I feel like you could realistically like swap this in for any standard Superman origin story. Like, I don't think it diverges that much. Uh and even like sometimes I felt like the inclusion of the like concept of him knowing about Clark Kent felt a little like, or knowing about Superman as a fictional character, like felt a little like much and maybe a little forced, but like
It's definitely some people who have critiqued this book on that axis, that like
Yeah.
it exists on like narrative contrivances, and you
yeah.
know,
Yeah,
like
and
that's, I think.
like and none of that made me dislike the book. I did feel like it was kind of forced sometimes and I would kind of roll my eyes, but like ultimately I came away with this with a good experience. So even if you could swap this in for like any standard Superman backstory, I don't think that's a bad thing
Yeah,
necessarily.
I
Like
know, absolutely.
I think this is a good book. If you took out the stuff about him knowing about Superman and just made this like a bog standard Superman origin comic, I would also be perfectly happy with that.
Yeah. To me, I think there's the only element of it that is like feels meaningfully different to me is that like he's more reflective, I think, and more like he's more self-doubting than Clark is, right?
Yeah.
Like which I think is actually an interesting take on the character, right? And one, because a lot of the time when we see Superman, there's like no friction between Superman and like external forces that aren't supervillains, right? Like any friction is like Superman and Lex Luthor hate, like Lex Luthor resents Superman and wants to kill him with kryptonite, right?
Yeah, or it's like a secret identity thing where he's like, "Oh man, I'm in love with Lois Lane, but I can't tell her." And like that's
Right.
what the
Yeah.
the Silver Age was. That was it mostly. And you throw in some fun villains, but
Yeah, and I'm obviously painting with a broad brush. There's obviously, you know, exceptions to this. I mean, I think when you look at like Tomasi and Gleason's run on Superman a few years ago when they introduced John for the first time, like that's obviously the friction there is, I think, really compelling. Which Superman having kids is also something we will probably get to because it is a part of this book. But one of the things that I actually really liked about it is that there are a lot of moments when Superman is like, or when Clark is like, I don't know if I should do the Superman thing anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's like, because every time especially early on when he does it, it's like he goes out and he does the right thing and saves some people and whatever the circumstance may be. And then, you know, the CIA tries to kidnap him, and at one point they succeed in kidnapping him and like torture him for he's like in like a lab somewhere for you know a day before he's able to escape, and they torture him and he like sees all kinds of corpses of like other potentially superpowered individuals that he, that he presumes they've like been doing tests on, and so there, and when it comes to like, that's actually the moment where he ends up telling Lois, right? They've been at that point dating for a few months, and I think that that's like one of the more compelling things is that like it's not a Superman who's like totally invulnerable, or at least he doesn't feel that he's totally invulnerable, and so there's more reflection on like the concept of like, is this worth the trade-off?
Yeah,
And obviously, oh, go ahead.
yeah, no, just like most, like you said, most Superman stories, it's not really a question of Clark's never really, or Superman's never really questioning, well, like, should I be helping people or doing stuff? And it's like in this way, like we talked about it earlier, it's like there's no supervillains to fight. There's not like a big threat that needs him, but it's like, so he's weighing that. And I think a lot of the critiques of Superman, or a lot of the ones where they flip him around, whether it's like, the boys or Invincible, it's like he's dead set on what he's doing, and that's an issue. He knows what he's doing, and it's like, that's he's all powerful and he thinks he's all knowing, and that's a recipe for disaster in a lot of people.
I mean, that's the whole thing with Injustice, right? Is that like he gets to a point where he like is like, well, I can stop all the bad things from happening forever, and
Yep.
don't I have a moral duty to do that? Which is not really a question that Injustice gets into, but but that is, Alex. I know you like the Injustice comics, but like
No, it's most of the fun in that is like, it's another world. It's these characters reacting in different ways. Yeah.
Yeah, like it's not the Superman parts about that, at least from what I've understood from hearing you talk about it. The Superman parts of that are not the like compelling parts about Injustice. Maybe I'm wrong.
We'll talk about it sometime. Don't worry.
Okay. But no, that is one of the things, and one of the things that like it does always come back to the point of like there's that scene like when I think it's like right after Lois tells him that she's pregnant, in the corniest way possible of sending him the fucking Hallmark card, which is adorable.
Extremely corny.
But he's like, well, they got me they got me once, they've tried it again, and she tells him like, well, you wouldn't you would feel like you weren't doing enough. And I think that that's like what compels me so much about the way Busiek writes Clark here is that like, despite the fact that he does often end up at a place of like, is what I'm doing worth the opportunity cost? It always like there is room for that reflection, but it always comes back at the end of the day to like, what makes Superman of like, he feels a moral obligation to help people and to help people in ways that like nobody else can, right? Because we talked about like, broadly speaking, yeah, like we live in a world where like natural disasters happen, and there's famine, and there's war, and those things happen, and the world keeps going, right? But having a good person with superpowers who can alleviate the suffering of those, is meaningful. And I think that that's one of the things that like this book really gets into is, even if the difference that he's making isn't the like, stopping the world from being destroyed by Lex Luthor's death ray or whatever.
Yeah.
He is meaningfully making the world a better place simply by like acting on it in the ways that he does.
Yeah. I feel like it's something where like a lot of people, when they think of superhero comics, it's like, the supervillain superheroes punching each other. So I think this would be a pretty good book to give someone who obviously knows who Clark Kent is and Superman, because just pop culture stuff, and be like, they come away with this with getting a nice view of like the character and everything, and still,
yeah,
I don't want to say a more mature version, but it like
there's an edge to this that isn't necessarily there in other like mainstream like an ongoing Superman series. There's things that wouldn't happen that they're able to do in this. They're also able to like change continuity in meaningful ways, which they can't in mainline books. I mean, this is something we talked about when we did the Gotham by Gaslight episode a few months ago, that like when you can like, and this is something that I think actually taps into that pretty well, into the ability of like, we can just do something totally different. Like we can make Superman have kids, and like we can see an old Superman, and that's, I think that's that's cool that they have the room to sort of do that. but yeah, I've got a couple other things that we can get into. I mean, like I said, the old Superman thing. I mean, this book takes place in over multiple time periods, so I'm curious what you guys thought about that as a storytelling device. What you thought about like how Clark changes with the time periods, how the types of stories change with the time periods. Um,
I liked it. I like the concept of superheroes aging. It's not really a thing that you get to see in a lot of mainstream comics. I mean, with reason, like you want to keep the story going, so you can't just have people aging in real time. But I like that we get to see the impact of aging on Clark as a character, and I don't know. I liked I don't know. Like I thought some of the rhythm of this book in like the second half, once we introduced like the daughter characters, I thought that like I didn't think it was as tight as like the first half of this book probably, but like I didn't dislike it. I just like it didn't feel as like I don't know. It was just not like as on point as I felt like the first half of the story was. But I like it. I like it in concept, and I thought that the execution in this book was pretty good. So I didn't really have that many complaints about it.
Was it like that in those issues? It like because in the first issue is just like about like the first two issues are very much about like one thing, where the first issue is like it's about him becoming Superman, and
it felt a lot more cohesive in those first two issues, and then like the latter half of the story, like I didn't think it was bad, I just felt like it wasn't as cohesive.
Yeah, like those first two issues have like their own narrative arcs, and then which is kind of like what aging is. I don't know.
Yeah, like
well,
it feels,
I mean that's fair.
It feels like the pace really picks up at the end, and it's kind of like, like his first 30 years of his life, and then the last 40 or so years of his life. He doesn't, spoilers, he doesn't die at the end. But he gets old, and it seems like right after he has the kid, which is about the halfway mark, it like goes really fast through the rest of his life. And maybe it's just like there aren't as many, like after having a kid, that's kind of like a big, milestone and everything. And he does have the big milestone later on, which I guess we haven't talked about, but he has kids, and he's like, I like the fact that he didn't know if they had powers or not, and they were sort of worried about that. And then it turns out they did have powers, but then they didn't tell him until, one day he's out there saving the day and his kids are there. I think it was also that great moment of like, the core of Superman, where it's like inspiring other people to do stuff. And it's like, also like the parenting thing, like you do your best to parent, but parents don't know what the hell they're doing for most of the time. And like to have your kid, what seems like turned out well, and going to, save the day and everything, both of them together. And it was a really nice moment.
I do like the page where Clark and Lois are like trying to bait them into showing superpowers as kids. It's like I just threw balls at them. I threw basketballs at them like really hard to see if they had.
That's not what happened. Basically.
That's not exactly. I'm exaggerating.
If they did that, I think I would have still liked it though. That would have been funny. Not quite the tone, but yeah.
And then I like that, like when Clark thinks he's figured it out, he's like, because he's like I said, he's not a journalist, he's an author. He writes like novels and books, and he like leaves out the manuscript of his new book, which is about like discovering people with superpowers. Like I love that stuff of like that's actually I really enjoyed that part of that element of the last issue of the whole, because like that's like taking the sort of like Clark Kent Superman ethos and like applying it again, like grounding it, applying it to his personal life, rather than a broader sort of concept of like, I'm saving the world, right? But it's like also being, a good part of his ethos is just like, my kids, I raised them, and I'm not gonna like force them to tell me if they're doing superheroic stuff. Like they can, like they're fine, they're adults. I know my limits. CIA got me once, but I showed them.
He kind of became friends with the agent.
Oh yes, that was literally what I was about to bring up. Was I really liked his little friendship with the like CIA agent or whatever he was, like that. I just that brought me some joy.
Yeah. No, I love that bit at the end where Clark's doing the thing where he's like, maybe I should have gotten him something. Like I know everything about this guy, and then like
Yeah.
at the end he's like, no, I knew your identity we figured out your identity at some point.
Mhm.
Your books are I like your books, by the way.
It
Yeah.
was so cute.
Yeah. No, it's good because it's that rapport that they build up, like, which obviously like they're very tense with one another, because there was a point in the book where Clark decides like, oh, I've got to maybe start working with them so that they stop coming after me and my and they don't come after my family.
Yeah, because we alluded to it, but they like the CIA ends up setting up a bunch of fake like disasters for Superman to respond to so that they can try to capture him, and he tends to know what they're doing every time.
Yeah.
And he voluntarily decides to start working with them.
Yeah, which you hate to see that, but
I mean, this book came out in what, 2004? Like
2004, yeah.
Yeah, that I would not.
I mean, it's still critical of the CIA. It's not like,
oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I would not expect a book that came out in 2004 to not have him working with the CIA in some capacity.
Actually, what I like about it is that like, or one thing that I did like about it is that like I think it's in the end of issue 3, because it happens while Lois is giving birth, is they ask him to do this like op in Nicaragua, or I don't remember if they say the name of the country. It might just be like some Latin American country where they ask him to go in and do this op. And the whole time is like he's conflicted about it, right? Like, and he still does it, but like that's another thing that goes back to that sort of like this being maybe a little bit more reflective take on the character, where like, he's not like a stars and stripes. The things that I do are good by nature of me doing them, which again goes back to the point about like other, like that's sort of the Superman and Injustice thing. That's the Homelander thing in The Boys to a lesser extent, other portrayals, but like that is kind of like the thesis on like the anti-hero or villain Superman, is that like if I do it, it's good because I'm Superman.
Yeah.
This is a version of the character who is like, I want to do good in the world, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everything I do is good. And it doesn't like, it's interesting because like he always keeps himself concealed, which another aspect of this I think is really interesting, is that he always, the public doesn't know about Superman, right? Like, there's like, a bunch of like conspiracy theories about him, like sightings and stuff.
And the CIA is like actively trying to hide it too, which is a funny little like they're trying to catch him, but they don't want the public to know at the same time.
Well, because it kind of, the implication of the end is that the CIA like did a bunch of tests that made him, right? Like that, like and a bunch of other superpowered characters as well.
Yeah.
I mean, although they don't really get into that. But what did you guys I'm curious, what did you guys think about the like Superman like hiding him, not just his identity as Clark Kent, but also like hiding himself from the public, like, because traditionally that's a big part of Superman, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, I think it's just the smartest move. Like the way that he like so meticulously went about like making sure that they like he would come from different directions when he was gonna be interacting with something he knew was a CIA op, or like, he went to such great lengths to keep his identity hidden, even though like it turns out they knew. Like I thought that was just I thought that was an interesting aspect of this, like the way that the writing goes into all the details of how he kept his identity, or he tried to keep his identity hidden.
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, like that might be the biggest difference between this and regular superhero comics or Superman comics, where he's like he's out there and he's like in your face beacon of hope. Whereas here's like he's just doing he's doing them anonymously. Basically, he's doing anonymous good deeds. kind of stuff. And it's like, would he have been, more of a positive impact if everyone knew about him? Who knows? And I kind of like that it is different in that way, where he's not just out there.
Yeah, I mean, I really like that. Like the climax of the first issue is that he's gonna go reveal himself to the world, right? He's gonna go to the state the fair in Kansas, and he's gonna, he's gonna be Clark. Everyone's gonna know. Oh, Clark Kent dressed up as Superman, lol. And then he's gonna fly and make it.
Yeah.
And then, but then there's a disaster that is orchestrated by because they're
journalists.
Well, putting on the tinfoil hat that the comic won't do it explicitly, but yeah, that journalist is absolutely a CIA plant. That is not a real journal. That is
there's a great moment there where Clark then decides in the moment, because he figures out that this person blew up on purpose, and she did it so she could get the exclusive for him. So him revealing himself at that time, or maybe ever, would not have been a good idea. And he's holding up a steel beam, and he's looks so strong, and then he's whoops, and then he drops it and is help.
Yeah.
It's he gets crushed by it.
Yeah. No, it's a great moment.
The kids
and
laugh
I think
at him.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that it's he never has to deal with this sort of public expectations of him, right? There's no there is it's weird because there's a Superman mythos in this world, but there's not a Clark Kent mythos.
There's no potential for an ego trip either, right? He's not his choice not to do it out there. It just kind of almost is more Superman than it kind of reinforces it by not being it. Where it's it's not about the acclaim. It's not about having this power and everyone knowing it. It's about trying to do his best in the world. So
yeah, and there's no there's no cult of personality, or that's probably not exactly the phrase I'm looking for, but I mean,
I think I know what you mean, though.
Yeah, there's no expectations on him. There's no fame or anything that comes with it, which I think is not that I think Superman normally is does it for the fame or anything, but I mean, there is a question that has come up in past Superman comics of people put him on a pedestal and see him as being perfect, and he doesn't necessarily think of himself that way, right? He doesn't that's something that I think is not really addressed often, but is probably pretty core to the character, is that he doesn't see himself as infallible. And that's why I like that. You don't get that discourse with him and people who think he is, but he has. That's so much of the internal conflict in this is that of he doesn't believe himself to be infallible, and that has to inform his decisions. So. Absolutely no. I think that's a big part of I think that is like Alex said, I think that's one of the bigger departures from normal or standard Superman comics.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I guess we've sort of touched on this already, but I mean, like I said earlier, Busiek's sort of known for frequently writing about superheroes outside the context of their superheroics. We talked. It's actually interesting because a couple episodes ago we talked about that issue of Tom King's Batman run that is about Clark and Bruce and Selina and Lois having a date night and not doing any not doing any superheroics. Is that something that you guys think that you gravitate towards more or less than normal superhero comics? Is do you wish that there was more space for that in mainline books? Do you think that it's cool when they do it in this stuff, but not really what you would want to do? Would you rather there was more interest in the people that were behind the masks, so more interested in Clark Kent than Superman, or more interested in Bruce Wayne than Batman? Because that's almost what this book is to me. Is it's a Clark Kent book, not a Superman book.
Yeah. I mean, I love that stuff, and I think, in a perfect world you have it alongside, but you have it alongside where if it's a 50-50 split, I think that's great, where you got the fun superheroics and the villains and the crazy fights and stuff like that, and the team ups, but then you also have hey, they're people too, they got powers, but and not in a cynical way. I mean, there is room for that and other stuff, but that's not what I'm really looking for in superhero comics. In that, Astro City is just such a fantastic series too, where it's just it's all that, and I think it'd be cool to read the early issues of that, because I haven't done that yet. I started one of the newest runs, but Yeah, it's really good. And like comparing it to Tom King's one, which I actually did end up reading it after the show, and it's like, you take that and you compare it to an issue of Astro City, or you compare it to this book, and it's very surface level, that one, whereas this one feels like a far deeper and much more realized one. And not that that one's terrible or anything, but I just think Busiek just has such a knack for recognizing that, and that's something that I just love seeing in superheroes, and it's something you don't see very often too, which like, yeah.
Yeah, the thing about like something like this, or something like the Superman and Batman going to the carnival issue, like it's almost sort of like you could use these as like a baby's first hero comic, like, and I don't mean that in a bad way. Like, I just, as someone who doesn't always read superhero comics as they are coming out constantly, like, I appreciate being able to have stories where it's kind of about like the slightly more human element than rather the like convoluted superheroing element that I can kind of jump into and read and not have to worry about like what happened 10 issues before necessarily.
Yeah.
Like, I understand, like, I like also comics with like a heavy continuity like that, so it's not like I only want these types of stories, but I like being able to just sort of like sit down with like a simple-ish Superman comic and like get a full Superman story without having to worry about some like big event that just happened in the DC universe.
Yeah. And one thing I like about Secret Identity is that it still has like it has like that personal aspect of it. That's most of what the book is, but it's not like there's a zero like superhero spectacle in it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh yeah.
It's not always in the same terms. I mean, like there is that scene where he stops a train from derailing and his daughters are there helping him. Like that's very classic superheroics. That's great. But there's also like that moment, like the scene after he finds out Lois is pregnant and they go out on the boat and he's doing like the flips out of the water and there's that double page spread, which is just like, I mean, it's just and Immonen does such a great job of capturing like the spectacle of that makes superhero comics so like compelling from a visual standpoint, from like a you just look at it and you go that's cool sort of standpoint, which is a huge part of superhero comics, and incorporates that into a story that you wouldn't think necessarily would have that same degree of spectacle.
It gives it like a 70-30 split, where like 70s non-spectacle, 30s spectacle, maybe even a little less, but like it works. And like when you have a little less spectacle, it's even more impactful too. And
it's like 65-35.
Yeah. We're gonna do a project where we go through the pages and say this one is spectacle, this one's
that's for our Patreon listeners and viewers.
Yeah.
I want to ask you guys a question, because I was just thinking this. This book is about basically if this guy named Clark Kent became Superman, right? So in the Batman Secret Identity one, do you think they gun his parents down? Like, is that part of it? You think like Busiek has a scene where like his parent, like they're walking to the movies and his parents are like, because that's like very integral to Batman. It's that pain and that hardship of like, I've lost someone close to me. Whereas that's not really Superman. Superman's like, he kind of feels, he's a guy from a different world. So I'm just curious, as someone who didn't actually finish reading that one. Like, jeez. I don't know.
Talking about Creature of the Night, right?
Is that what it's called?
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, Creature of the Night. It's the same. Okay, yeah. Like, I mean, this concept. This probably shows how little impact it had on you, but they do murder his parents in the first issue. Like,
that's fantastic. I'm gonna read that one now. I'm gonna see how it goes.
That does happen. That one is compelling because it has this more like supernatural bent to it, which is interesting, but I it's been so long since I read it. I don't remember. My memory of it isn't particularly fresh.
Guess we gotta
But-
put it on the
Busiek's a good
list.
writer.
It's kind of like the inversion where, like, if I remember correctly, he likes Batman comics. Like, he's like really into Batman comics, and like he likes being named Bruce Wayne. Like, he thinks it's cool, which I think is, you know, in keeping with.
It's coming back to me. Does he somehow like set up the murder or something, or is that a
No,
different
it's
one?
not a Tommy Elliott and Hush situation.
Oh, okay.
It's not a I killed my parents so I could become epic. It's not no, it's not quite that.
Oh, it's like a robbery gone wrong.
It's
in
the same
house.
thing. Like it's not exactly the same setup, but it's the same sort of, like, you know, he is a rich kid with rich parents. They get robbed. They're not supposed to die, but the guy kind of like freaks out and shoots them and kills them. Right? But then can't kill the kid.
You know what? With John Paul Leonard, I might actually give this another go.
We gotta put it on our list.
I think I called him Jean Paul Valley earlier in the episode, which is Azrael's actual identity.
Oh yeah.
So if I did that, I'm sorry. It's Jean Paul Leon. Jean Paul Leon, a fantastic artist.
Maybe we'll add it to the list, Emily. Yeah.
Yeah, it would be an
future.
interesting one to do, I think, especially like having done the Secret Identity.
I mean, it makes sense that like that's so integral to Batman, but it's just funny that this book about like, oh, I love Batman, then your parents get shot.
Yeah. So my answer to the question is yes. In the Batman version, I would kill his parents.
Sick.
In the Flash version, I don't know if I would put his dad in jail though. And I don't know enough about Hal Jordan's relationship with his parents.
His dad was a pilot and died.
Right, in Korea.
Something like that. I think it changes.
No,
based on the thing.
I'm actually confusing because I think I'm just getting it confused with New
Or did he
Frontier.
die in a
Hal
plane?
Jordan is a pilot in Korea.
Yeah, that might be in New Frontier. Yeah.
That's what I don't remember.
Anyway, Superman.
You people have read too many comics.
You know what? Ever since we stopped the first podcast about comics, I've read less. So that's a lie. I've bought so many
Character
trades
development.
actually. Shoot, but it's been complete stories. I have closure.
That's how you ended up with Superman's Secret Identity.
I got a problem if I didn't remember like buying this and I didn't read it. Like Jesus. I will say on the back, sorry, it says the sold-out critically acclaimed miniseries is collected in this handsome volume.
It is a
nice-
handsome
It's
volume.
still a handsome volume.
Nice, handsome little volume. Well, before we get into some wrap up stuff, did you guys have any sort of like closing thoughts on Secret Identity? Anything that we didn't quite get to that you wanted to shout out or talk about?
Not really.
I think it holds up well.
Not on my end. I feel like I said my piece on it.
Yeah, I mean, we're reading in 2022, and I think it holds up very well for a book. From that era.
Absolutely.
It hits that timelessness that Superman sort of has, so it's good.
Yeah, like I had no idea this was an early 2000s comic book, which is not usually the norm when I'm reading an early 2000s comic book.
Yeah, that's not usually
Brian
what you
came on.
usually come away saying, "God damn, this sure was written in 2004."
Like I would have, if you had asked me to guess, I would have like probably guessed that this was like a 2012 book.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, it definitely just feels like a contemporary, superhero comic book in a way that like a lot of not everything does, right?
Yeah.
Like even things that are like classics and timeless, like Watchmen is very much of its time. Even like like Saga of the Swamp Thing or Frank Miller's Daredevil.
It's part of the charm too, right? Like that's
100%. Cool. Well, I guess we should get into since we're crying in the book club. I would ask what character cries the most, but I don't know that there's like enough full characters. So, what event do you think Clark? When do you think Clark cried the most in this series?
I'm gonna be real. I did not. We were supposed to record this episode like a couple of weeks ago.
That's
and
true.
I read it in preparation for that. I did not reread it, so
That's fair.
Mhm.
I don't know.
I think it's either when he's a kid and everyone's giving him Superman stuff and he hates Superman and he's all like, then he goes to his room and he just, starts crying, or when he's like his daughters, come and save the day with him as like a nice
Oh
positive
yeah,
cry.
Like,
no,
that's a happy cry, yeah.
I'm gonna say that he does a happy cry when his daughters save the day with him, because that was really sweet.
Yeah, that was very sweet.
I
Moved
liked
my ice cold heart to tears.
Your cold dead heart.
Yeah, I definitely like. There's a number of moments in that last issue that really got me. That one about like he just is like that one double page spread of him like up in Antarctica watching the sun go down. There's just like a lot of really beautiful. I mean, Stuart Immonen captures that sort of like sweeping, those like large pulled out shots so well. Like he does such a good job with stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Well, that has been Superman's Secret Identity, which is the topic for this episode. But we've got some other stuff before we get out of here. You may be hearing a little bell sound, a little alarm, something going off in the background. Oh no, there's probably something in there, which is the sound of the Doomsday Clock, which means that it's time for a very first segment on Crying in the Book Club, which is our very first cry space. You would think maybe we would have introduced this in episode 1. It's thematic to the title of the show.
Yeah.
We're 9 episodes in. We're like, no, we'll do it now. We'll start it now. So you know what? I'm the host. I get to punt the football.
Damn, he's a sportsman.
I guess it is football season. So, what's something that made you guys cry this week?
Alex, do you want to go first?
Nope.
Or
nope.
Okay.
That's what you get for asking.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Well, mine's a little unfortunately real.
No.
So I'm not gonna give too many details about this, but I have been trying to get my ducks in a row to schedule an elective surgery, and I was just about fully done with everything that I needed to do before submitting it to the dreaded American insurance, and my spouse's job got acquired by another company, so now our insurance is changing, and I don't know if the procedure I was supposed to be getting is going to be covered, and we don't have our new insurance information, even though the next month starts as of recording in just a few days. So I am in the limbo of not knowing if the thing that I have been like working on doing stuff to get this approved for since May is going to be covered by my insurance. So that definitely made me cry earlier this week.
And this is why, as many truth-telling politicians will tell you, Americans love their private health care. They love their healthcare. They love their private healthcare plans.
Love my private healthcare.
Yeah, the Premier of Ontario is trying to get us private healthcare.
Oh, you're gonna love it, dude! It rocks.
It's so good.
It rocks. Every time you go to the doctor, they're gonna try to charge you like thousands of dollars that your insurance should cover, and you might have to fight with your insurance for like 3 months to actually pay for the things they say they're gonna pay for. It's so cool, dude. It's like such a cool thing. It's like you get to like be on the phone for hours.
It's like really fun.
My brain is like very comic related, so this is like people selling me on Batman Hush, and then me reading it, and it's like they're both negative. But yeah, I hope that the insurance thing sorts out, Emily. So this will become
everything is gonna be fine, like no matter what happens, like, but it's just annoying, and I did cry in real life about it.
I can't blame you.
Yeah, and I mean, like, you were ready for it, right? So it's like,
I literally, like, all that needed to be done was have, like, everything that I had done, all the appointments I had been to, submitted for insurance to let them know of my intentions to get surgery, and then, like, now I have to figure out a whole new insurance company. But alas.
If you like your private health insurance plan, you can keep it.
Okay, thanks. Thanks.
What about you, Alex? What made you cry this week?
I kind of talked about it before the show, but those on the show, those listening to the show haven't heard it yet.
We're on the show.
You are on the show. Thanks for being on the show, guys.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's a happy cry, and it wasn't, I didn't actually cry, but it was so my cousins from Ukraine are here, living here. And for the young one's birthday, he wanted to watch Star Wars. And he wanted to watch Star Wars first. And then I told him it's 40 years old. And he's like, I don't want to watch a 40-year-old movie. Oh, God, I don't know if I want to watch it anymore.
God, fucking Zoomers.
And then, episode 4 plays. And, like, by the end of it, he's just like, yeah, Luke Skywalker. And he's like this blonde kid who looks kind of just like Luke Skywalker. Like, same like, length hair and everything.
Oh, I love that.
And then his mom was really into it too. So today we finished episode 5, and they figured out that, Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker related. They don't know about. Oh my gosh! My cousin asked, who's Leia gonna end up with, Han or Luke? And it's like, you'll find out next episode, and you'll be like, oh God. So yeah, no, it was just like I was saying before the show. It's like so strange to have someone who hasn't like seen Star Wars or know about Luke and Vader and stuff like that, and I know Star Wars over the last few years has been very toxic with like the fandom and stuff like that. So it was like a nice pure Star Wars moment to go along with.
Such a joy.
Yeah. To go along with watching Star Wars with Jean-Luc on Discord, even though some of them aren't good. So, it's good.
Someday I'll watch episode 7, 8, I think. I don't remember what the numbers are. What is Rise of Skywalker?
9. You haven't seen it?
9?
Oh,
no, lucky. I still have not seen Rise of Skywalker.
We'll do an episode like 4 years after it's come out. That's good.
I would watch it with the two of you for sure.
Yeah, gonna make me sit through that movie.
Is this your cry space, Jean-Luc? It's happening right now.
No, my cry space. Okay, my cry space also. I had one that was like a real life thing, but I decided to go with something a little more, a little fun. Because this also made me cry.
Want
but it
to
made
bring
me cry
some levity to the podcast?
It made me cry laughing. So if you'll look in your Discord in our Discord channel right now, you'll see a link.
I got a notification.
To a
Why is this
24-second video. This will probably not mean anything to Alex. Emily will at least understand the context
to
of
load Discord.
So this is a video from 2020. Yeah. Yes. So this really killed me a couple days ago when I saw it for the first time. This has been around for like 2 years now, I guess. But it is the third impact scene from End of Evangelion with a down-toned version of Panic at the Disco's High Hopes playing over it, intercut with footage of Pete Buttigieg supporters doing the High Hopes dance during the 2020 Democratic primary. And let me tell you, those 24 seconds had me in stitches. I must have watched this video like 6 times back to back a couple of nights ago when I saw it for the first time.
There's something hypnotic about it. I've never seen Evangelion. I know Pete Buttigieg very, very, from what Jean-Luc talks about, but wow. Are
you watching it, Emily? It's.
Can this be our outro?
I'm specifically watching it for the second time.
I almost had a vision.
Oh my god.
So
Oh my god. That was just so much.
it's really a lot to
I might be
to
almost
take in.
in tears right now.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
I just have it on loop on my other
It's so
monitor. I'm just
catchy.
like,
And knowing
Yeah.
that it's Pete Buttigieg supporters doing that.
my god.
doing another fun fact that you might not know this, Alex, and Emily, I you probably know this. There is like a specific dance that they did that the Pete supporters did to High Hopes, and it was like,
it was really corny.
It is cult-like in nature. I'll send you. I'll send you a link after the.
It was really corny.
Yeah.
Wow. Keep your politics out of my comics podcast.
But that's my cry space for the week, because I found
That's
that really
fantastic.
funny. I'm putting a YouTube link in the Discord chat for the actual High Hopes video.
Oh yeah, I've seen the dance.
I know you've seen it. I want to subject Alex to
All right, here we go. Press and play.
Oh god.
What is it? It like doesn't
Alex,
go with the music at all.
Can you do the dance, please?
Yeah. Ha hopes for okay. Also, okay. I just what I'm seeing. It's a lot of people dancing. A lot of them are like middle-aged white people, and they're like doing like the Macarena, but it's to like High Hopes, and but they're all doing it perfectly in sync. Like, I don't know how long they practiced this. Oh no, Mama said.
What I love about the High Hopes dance is that every time you see it, the people doing it are perfectly in sync, but it is not at all in sync to the music.
Yeah,
it's
like high. Wow. Now I'm gonna watch the Evangelion one again.
It's so much.
If you only knew the context for the Evangelion stuff, then it would be
next level.
Even yep.
But that won't happen this week.
Maybe someday we'll get Alex to watch Eva.
We could read the Eva manga for this podcast.
We should read they did like an Evangelion like slice of life spin-off manga.
Yeah, the Shinji Ikari Raising Project.
Is that actually what it's called?
That's what it's called. Yeah, the Shinji Ikari Raising. I've referenced it many a time on my other podcast.
That's amazing. I did not know that was the name of it.
Yeah, it's called the Shinji Ikari Raising Project.
I thought you were doing a bit, and
No.
I thought it was funny.
No, the bit is that's the name of the manga.
The bit is that you could call Neon Genesis Evangelion the Shinji Ikari Racing Project, and all right. Actually, we can't do Evangelion because I feel like that would be just as self-indulgent as Amory Wars for you and I, Emily. And
I can take a break once in a while. Although if the point is for me to watch it, I don't know, maybe not.
Yeah,
or read it. We can do movies. We can branch. Anyway,
can we do 26 episodes of an anime and 5 movies?
Yes.
If we can do Riverdale, I'm in.
Oh, I mean, that's not you don't have to convince me. But maybe that'll happen. Maybe in the future we will be doing my personal Evangelion hatchet order, the way that I believe it's meant to be watched.
There's 5 Evangelion movies?
Yep.
Well, that's yes. The answer.
Okay, no, I don't want to know. I don't want to know. I'm sorry I asked.
The answer is yes.
Some people will tell you that 2 of them are the same as things in the show, but like they introduce Mari and Ray's characters. It's all.
So it's like they take a season and put it into one movie, kind of thing.
It's complicated.
They do that. That is the idea that Hideaki Anno was like, I don't like this idea anymore after he did one of them. And so then he's like, yeah, what if I did a 2.5 hour movie that explains why I think End of Evangelion is bullshit now? And you know what? He's right.
Wow.
But anyway, we should wrap the show. I love End of Evangelion. It's total bullshit. Anyway. You can follow us on Twitter at Crying Book Club. You can ask me for my hatchet order of Evangelion at what's my Twitter? Mountain Dew
Liker. Yeah.
And you can follow me on Letterboxd at JL Botbill, where I have logged all 5 of the Evangelion movies, and you can see me telling the truth about Evangelion 3.0, which is that it sucks. You can Emily, where can people find you online?
They can find me at mpandanada on Twitter. They can also find me on twitch.tv at pandabor. I am probably still playing the Ace Attorney games whenever this comes out. And you can also find my podcasts, Imagine Me and Utana, which is in its current form, Imagine Me and Mawaryu Penguin Drum, which is never fun or good to say, or the Fresh Podcast Market, or That Looks Terrible, which may or may not have an episode out by the time this goes out, or a secret other podcast, because I cannot be stopped, unfortunately.
Wait. Emily, you don't know if an episode of a new podcast is going to be out yet, but there might be a secret podcast. Is this how confusing Evangelion's going to be if I try to watch it? Is it like 9 different orders?
No. The problem is that like I am not in charge of the release of either of these podcasts, so I can't actually guarantee when they win or will not be out.
Evangelion makes perfect sense if you follow my flowchart exactly.
Alex, where can people find you online?
You can find me on Twitter at AlexHansiuk. That's it. Stay away.
No other secret podcasts.
No more. Ooh, you guys want to do another podcast? We'll talk about it after.
Yeah.
Okay, so cool.
Do a secret podcast. All right, well, that is gonna do it for this week. Thank you for listening.
Sorry.
You okay? Before we go,
sorry. Sorry, a lot just happened in the last 3 seconds.
You good?
No, I hit the table and then Mr. Mayor Pete's dancer started dancing.
Alex has perfected the High Hopes dance.
By the time we record the next episode, Alex is going to have this down pat.
Yeah, he'll have it nailed.
You know, it kind of works.
Maybe this is like a secret like CIA code dance that like Alex did the whole dance perfectly and now he's been activated.
I feel a little different and I feel a little scared right now.